silent, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was, too weary to fight.
Some of the guys we've had on are guys who have impacted our lives directly, who we've either met or known, or people that I think we see as men who have value in the way that they live their lives, and things that they live their lives in ways that we think others could learn from. And so, Tim, one of the first things we like to do is, what are your thoughts on masculinity? Like when you think and you hear the word masculine, what are some of the things that come to your mind?
So do you want me to begin to answer that question?
You can, or we could jump into a more important question of your mug. Like what's going on with the mug? Let's start there then.
We'll begin with the mug. So I don't know as though I ever needed a favorite mug status.
Okay.
But so my sister, so I grew up in Detroit.
Okay.
My sister lives back there near my parents, and she had a mug. And once you've experienced what a good mug should be, it's hard to go back to maybe one that isn't as good. So she had this mug. It was basically this exact mug, but she had her version of it.
Okay.
And the first thing I noticed was just that the handle has enough space for all my fingers.
Yep.
So
I was looking at that.
That was really cool. And then my knuckles don't hit the cup.
Oh,
so that was cool.
That's awesome.
And then another thing I noticed, and once you notice this, you'll start noticing it in some other mugs. So it's got some really cool artwork on the front. It says Homes. I grew up in Michigan, the Great Lakes.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of cool there. But it also has a logo on the other side, because a lot of cups will only have printing on one side.
Yep.
And usually it's on the left side.
Okay.
And so you're drinking out of this mug and you're looking at whatever this cool thing is.
Yep.
And then everybody else is just seeing blank white.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, I want to be able to show off my cool thing.
That's right.
And I want something interesting to look at myself. But then the other thing is that the walls aren't super thick. So I don't know if that affects like the temperature.
Sure.
But it definitely makes it easier to drink out of.
Okay.
So this is my favorite mug.
That's awesome. I was looking at mine, and then I was looking at yours, and I was like, man, that handle looks really comfortable. Like it's almost like ergonomic.
You want to try it?
I do.
Yeah, you should try it.
Ooh.
Isn't that nice? See how you like your knuckles aren't
My finger
banging
doesn't have to go under. That's always
the ring, like the ring isn't banging on it.
Dude. That's and it's got Michigan. That's
look, all the Great Lakes. It says,
that's nice.
Isn't that cool?
I think you're the only other person I've met who's particular about how the cup feels when you're holding it.
I think it's important.
No, it is. All my cups are like that. I pick very specific
look at this. I got my pinkies under there. My knuckles are all up against it. It's terrible. I'm gonna have to get one of those mugs.
So Tim, if you ever make merch, remember the handle.
Yep. We'll have to remember that. I love that you brought your own mug, though. That's fantastic. Yeah, well, let's start. You brought up that you're from Michigan. Tell us a little bit about Detroit.
So my experience. Grew up. So born in Michigan. My parents were both from Michigan. They were more west side of the state, near the lake.
Okay.
And then I guess you're gonna get a little bit of my past here, which I hope is okay.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
So when I was maybe 3, we moved to the Detroit area, partially so my parents could be a part of a church.
Okay.
I don't know all the backstory of the exact who they were connected with, how they ended up in this church. They had met in a Bible study. My dad was a little older than my mom. One really cool story that my dad tells often is, so he'd come out of the Navy, made some bad decisions, had found the Lord, was a chain smoker, and my mom told him, if you want to marry me, you're gonna have to stop smoking. Went to some sort of Christian camp
Okay.
type of thing. Spent most of the weekend in the car, kicking the windows out and denting the ceiling and screaming, and hasn't had a cigarette since.
Dang.
And that helped earn the favor of my mom. Anyway, moved over to what would be the east side in
Okay.
Michigan, the Detroit area. He needed a job, got a job with General Motors,
Okay.
worked with them for 25 years,
Okay.
something like that. I think he got out right before like when they were still doing buyouts, right before the 07
Yep.
bubble thing.
Yep.
Grew up in the church. Parents were very involved, far from perfect. You know, love my dad. He definitely dealt with some anger issues from his own past and some of that kind of stuff. Have 2 older siblings. My oldest brother, Paul, is adult special needs.
Okay.
So my parents still take care of him. They
Right.
actually do. There's actually a lot of really cool things in the area for him. He does adult, like multiple churches have Bible studies. He does
Cool.
adaptive sports,
Okay.
things like that. And then I have an older sister who's 15 months older. We were one of, after second grade, I began homeschooling. We were one of the pioneering families kind of in the area
Okay.
when nobody knew what we were doing and why
Yeah.
we were doing it. And it was weird and not sure if it was legal or not. You know, I was younger. So homeschool family, kind of co-opt with some other families and did stuff. It's kind of cool. The stuff they were doing was kind of cutting edge for the time.
Yeah.
This would have been like late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people were doing that kind of
Mm-mm.
stuff. And then in Michigan, you couldn't play sports unless you were in some sort of school. There was no mechanism for a homeschooler to play sports. So I can only imagine some of the conversations my parents were having. Went back to a big public high school.
Okay.
Found my way on the track team
Okay.
in big high school. Found my way to track and football.
Okay.
And then my older sister went to Hillsdale College.
Yep.
Which sounds like you've heard of. And then I followed her there. Walked on the track team, earned a scholarship.
Oh.
Went into history and PE because I knew I wanted to teach and coach. But the Detroit area, interesting place. I would say reputation and news and stuff is probably worse than it really is.
Okay.
Downtown is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've improved it a ton.
I've heard that.
You know, we were never afraid to go down to I only went once, but like Joe Louis Arena where the Red Wings played, like downtown. Now all the stadiums are down there. Some of the neighborhoods. So Detroit is laid out in Old Northwest Territory, sort of mile grids.
Okay.
And so anywhere we wanted to go, you always knew I need to go there. I'm gonna go up 2 miles and over 2. And all the road names have road names now, except some of them have kept the old mile.
Okay.
So like 8 Mile.
Yep.
Not so good.
Right.
Kind of a rougher area. 11 Mile is one that's kept its name. And I grew up about 26 Mile.
Okay.
So actually a very, it's the county north of Wayne County where Detroit is. It's actually one of the richest counties in the country because of the white collar automotive industry. Like everybody we knew, everybody's parents either worked for one of the big 3 or they worked in some company that supported the big 3 and stuff like that.
Interesting. What took you to Hillsdale? I mean, I know you said your sister went. Like, why did you pick Hillsdale?
You know, coming from conservative Christian parents, it was like, if we can get in, you're probably going there.
That was your parents?
I would say, yeah, parents. I wanted to go there. I would say probably my short list. I knew we had some family friends. I knew a church I could have gone to in Mount Pleasant if I'd have chosen like Central Michigan. I probably would have applied there, or Oakland. The So the big public high school I went, the area I grew up in is not particularly, it's very affluent. It's not particularly religious.
Okay.
So like there was a couple churches around, and you kind of like, we knew all those churches. We played softball against those churches and stuff. But I would say most of the kids I knew in high school weren't big Catholic population. But I'd say most of them weren't churchgoers. I had buddies in high school. They weren't believers. They would go to church with me.
Okay.
I didn't do anything dumb, stayed out of trouble, that kind of thing. But when my sister went to Hillsdale, I don't remember if it was her meeting friends, bringing people home, or me going there. But I
Yeah.
started actually even before that, when I was a junior in high school, I came out to Summit Ministries here.
Okay. Yeah.
And, they have that, like, you ever have heard the term, like you go to camp and you have like this camp letdown and
Mm-hmm.
you come back?
Yep.
Like, I met kids there who were believers and they were fun and we were doing stuff for 2 weeks or whatever it was. And then it was like back to my life. And so that had been a big, like, man, I desire that. And
Yeah.
then I think I went and stayed with her at Hillsdale, and I stayed in the dorm room with a couple of her buddies. They were cool.
Yeah.
They were believers.
Okay.
Like, they talked about believing things.
Cool.
She had a big group of friends that all hung out. They probably drank coffee and talked about their faith. They just did cool things.
Yeah.
And they all played acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they were just cool people and they were believers. And I just hadn't experienced a lot of that. And,
Okay.
desired that, I would say.
That's cool. I actually didn't realize that there was quite a large Christian like population up there. I guess is it a Christian college?
So Hillsdale, interestingly, wasn't.
Okay.
When I was there, it was the most conservative college in the country. They didn't accept any government funds.
Whoa.
And had won a court case maybe in the 70s to not accept any government funds.
Wow.
It would be a little bit like TCA in that it wasn't, but it attracted those types.
Yeah.
And, thinking back on the groups there, I mean, that had frat houses,
Sure.
Not everybody on the track team was doing the best things in their
Yeah.
hotel rooms and things like that.
Yeah.
But it was not hard to find people of similar interests. InterVarsity was kind of the big ministry. It's not a big school, so there wasn't probably enough human resource. I don't like the term human resources. Enough human population to have multiple ministries. So that
Okay.
just happened to be the one.
Okay.
And it was big. A lot of people
Okay.
went to it. Christy's older brother was in the dorm when I moved in. He was a senior. I was a freshman. He was leading a Bible study in the dorm.
Okay.
So I met him. He was friends with my sister already.
Okay.
Christy came in the next year. Actually was just joking with my kids. My kids, I think it's one of those things where they secretly love it, but they're like disgusted, like when you talk
Yeah.
about like romancing their mom and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have this very clear memory of her. She was visiting her brother Brian at InterVarsity, like at the large group. And I remember meeting her and like, Brian has a younger, in fact, I described to them, I'm like, do you know when, what's his name? The Lego movie, the main character.
Emmett.
You're like, do you know when Emmett first sees Wild Style and her hair's like going like this as she
Slow-mo.
walks? I'm like, that was what it was like when I met your mom. And they're like, oh, Dad, no.
Don't do it. Don't do it. That's awesome. That's cool. So you ran track there?
Ran track, walked on, ran all 4 years, indoor and outdoor.
Dang.
Stayed a 5th year to finish my degree.
Okay.
Was able to coach on the track team.
Sweet.
For a 5th year. It's kind of like I wasn't really in grad school,
Right.
but coached like I was.
Okay.
Knew I wanted to get into education, both. I wanted to get into education and coaching, both because I'd had, especially at Hillsdale, I had no interest in history in high school. I had some teachers that were like fill in the blank textbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I had this one teacher. I don't think she ever told us a single like story from history. Like, how does that happen in a history class?
Right.
And then I go into freshman world history with Dr. Wilson, and he's from Phelps, New York, home of the brave. Like, he just tells stories. He stands in front and does this weird twiddle thing with his thumbs and just told like American history stories. And like, I went from like, in the back of the class to like, I'm in front taking notes. And then I took a 2 World Wars class with my favorite professor ever. And I just knew I wanted to, and then I did sort of PE on the side because I knew, that's probably it's a good combo.
Yeah.
I liked my PE classes in high school. I took some in college. And interestingly now I've actually moved away. I don't teach history anymore.
Dang.
I'm all weights and conditioning. And then I did a master's several years ago in sports management.
Yeah.
But now I teach a sports business class
At TCA?
at TCA that I created. It's kind of fun.
Tim, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Your mic. Can you pull it a little bit more to your left, towards the center? Yeah.
Like this, because I keep turning this way.
Yeah.
Oh,
Weird that it's like in my face.
I'm trying to lower it too.
Okay.
Look over here. Sorry.
is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
We'll see. Sorry about the interruption. I'm really rusty at this, so.
Okay, so history's like your like love. So you did your master's on sports management.
Mhm.
And you're teaching that at TCA now. Are you wanting to go back and teach history eventually? Is that something like
I partly got out of it because life is busy. Coaching football,
Yeah.
head track coach, track team just keeps growing. I'm head of the PE department.
wow. Okay.
I created this class, and I wasn't spending, like, one of the things we would like, so being one of the department leads, when I meet with other department leads and we talk about, hey, these are the things we'd love our teachers to be able to do.
Yeah.
One of the things you want out of your teachers is for them to be lifelong learners,
Mhm.
for them to be passionate about their subject. And I'd found, first of all, I needed a little margin in my life. And I just found that I wasn't spending my extra time reading and studying the way I felt good. I was using lesson plans
Okay.
that were, that were old. And some of them were great. I have been doing some guest lecturing in some classes,
Cool.
stuff like that, going in like, hey, you need a lesson on Pearl Harbor or whatever, which I'm hoping to be able to see here in January, or I've done a few of those kind of things that sort of keeps my toe in the waters.
Okay.
But everybody loves history. Not everybody, but a lot of people, military history especially has sort of become pop culture.
Yep.
And so a lot of people are interested in it.
Yep.
And my son loves it, and so if there's a movie we're gonna go see, I just don't teach it every day, which is okay.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to your point, like, I think when you have people who know how to talk about history and tell it as a story, right? If you think about the way, societies have developed, we started off with oral traditions, right? I mean, these are stories. So we're telling history as a story.
Right.
And I think I can definitely relate to, your experience, when you said you had teachers that just like fill in the blank. I've had some teachers like that. And it's like, that's all you're doing is memorizing facts at that point.
Right.
That is, nobody likes that. Doctors don't even like that, So I think that, when you have people who can tell stories and who are engaged, I think that makes a huge difference when they not only do they like see the value of the story, but like they're into it.
Right.
So,
and comparatively, my sports are my interest.
yeah, clearly
teaching sports business, I've obviously got an outline for the course. I've got a scope and sequence, but a new story pops about the the Athletics trying to get their new stadium passed in Oakland, right? That's a story that I'm just happen to see and reading and bringing in. I was just reading on ESPN today, somebody just signed a lifetime contract with Adidas as like an apparel lifestyle contract.
Whoa.
You know, those kind of things. It's stuff I pay attention to.
Yeah.
And then in strength and conditioning, I mean, I'm constantly learning new ideas and testing them on the kids.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know all the things we want to talk about, but if we want to go into fitness, if we want to, there's all kinds of stuff that
I
we
would
could
love
go
to get into that, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
I had thought earlier today as I'm kind of into like being in a full rested squat.
okay.
There's all kinds of benefits for it. I'm like, maybe we should do our interview while we're sitting in a full rested squat. Although you can really only last like, you know, a couple minutes.
I was going to say,
before
man,
your shins start to hurt a little bit and your back. It's supposed to be actually really good for your back. But
interesting. Okay. So, well, let's get into the masculinity piece.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, society has some things to say about men now.
Yep.
I think we on this show and a lot of people, I think, look at what society's doing to men and it's like, this is not good for us. So, you know, what are your thoughts on maybe the current state of masculinity and what it should look like?
Yeah. I don't know if you want me to help you out here since we transitioned.
Sure.
Do you want to introduce me?
Yeah. Did you see his little
I saw the
whiteboard?
sign
earlier?
Yeah, I don't know how to call
Oh my
it.
goodness. Yeah. I can't believe it's been a little bit since we've done an interview. So
No.
as Mike has said
Context
about
helps me. Sorry.
17 different times. So guys, we have Tim Daggett joining us, Coach Tim Daggett. He coached me as a junior, and I think that was your first year at TCA, yeah?
0304 was my first season.
Yep. So that would have been my junior year. And then you have been there for 20 years.
This is the end of this year. I'll have completed 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Okay.
So
So
I coach in football and track, both. Neither. obviously-
football.
Football. Did you run?
I did
was
not
trying to
run
remember.
track.
I was trying to remember.
I
if
did
you ran
not
or
run
Okay.
track. So it's interesting. I actually ran track my sophomore year, which was the year before you.
Okay.
And I hated it. I liked the 200. But you know, just like most, from what I've when talking with people, there's nobody who really loves. There's a few people out there who love the 400. Most people are like, yeah, I was made to run the 400.
You don't love it. You're called to it. It's a calling.
Well, either way, yeah.
I mean, everybody wants, you want kids. I was a 4. I was a long sprinter in college.
Okay.
and It was where I found my place.
Yeah.
But it's not the only hard.
Oh no, it's
event.
not.
8 and 300 hurdles. And
Yep.
There's a lot of ways to make yourself not feel comfortable. on the track.
Absolutely. Okay. So, you teach at TCA, but you're also the head football coach
I'm not the head football coach.
oh, you're not the head football. Okay.
So I'm the head track coach.
Head track coach.
And coach the sprinters.
Okay.
I have never actually been the head football coach.
Oh,
I'm on coach like 7 or 8 or something like
Yeah.
that. Do you ever see the movie, the Disney version of the Three Musketeers?
yeah.
There's this scene in there where Cardinal Richelieu, who's the bad guy,
Yeah.
he's like, kings may come and kings may go, but one thing remains the same, and that's me. Which is probably a good representation of Cardinal Richelieu. But I think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I love our coach. I hope he stays for a long time.
Okay.
But we've had a few.
Okay.
And
Yeah. You guys.
I'm not a kingmaker, right? I don't make these guys.
Right.
I'm happy to be in the fall. I'm happy to just be a position coach.
Yep.
Actually just moved from quarterbacks back to running backs for the
Okay.
first time in a long time.
Okay.
Love it. Love it.
That's awesome. Okay. So, but you're heavily involved in sports,
Yes.
as you kind of mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Okay. Shoot, man, and you probably have some thoughts on masculinity. You're around these young men all the time, and
Yeah.
part of your job is to help give them or impart wisdom or give them an example or help build them up into
Yeah.
young men, right? Like these are 16, 17-year-old young men. So I
Yeah.
don't know. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, let me I've had this, I got a lot of thoughts rattling around in my brain. I say that all the time. I got thoughts rattling. I'm like, is my head just sort of empty and these thoughts are just banging around there. You know, growing up, I don't remember a lot of talk about being manly
Yep.
and stuff. You know, I would consider my dad manly.
Yep.
He likes to, I was thinking too of like, is there certain things you have to like if you're gonna man? I don't remember a lot of conversation about that, but I do remember having, especially through the church and some coaches, I remember having some examples of men that I admired and wanted to be like. I remember having those.
Okay.
I also have this strange memory of, I don't know if my dad was turning 40 or 50.
Okay.
And like, I think they threw like I was maybe 50. I think they threw like an over the hill party.
Yeah.
Or something maybe. And somebody gave him like one of those floppy Frisbees that said, being male is a matter of birth, being a man is a matter of choice. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so I remember that going into like, I don't remember a lot of conversation. I mean, in high school, you're just trying to get by. You're trying to be cool.
Yep.
And so, you know, I probably fell into some of the trappings of what culture thinks it is to be a man.
Yeah.
Although I think there's really mixed. I actually think the culture doesn't have a compass.
Yeah.
And so there isn't a clear message in any direction on what there is to be a man. I think the compass needle's just spinning. We'll get back to that. In college, like as you're really sort of becoming more than in high school, you're becoming who you are. Went from like being in Bible studies to leading Bible studies to trying to figure out, and I know I went through, and I'm probably still recovering from some of the like, this is what I think it's really cool to be a man. Like you have to be stoic. Like feelings are bad.
Yeah.
You gotta like cigars. You gotta like black coffee.
Yeah.
Actually do like black coffee.
I do too.
Seattle's best portside blend, very smooth. That's what I do.
Is it good? Okay.
I dig it. You know, and there was some like joking and stuff about like Bachelor to the Rapture, but then also like we all had this anxiety, are we going to find our bride?
Right.
You know, some of that kind of stuff. What kind of, you know, does a man have to be out in the woods wearing camo? Is a man somebody who's like really intellectual? Right. So just trying to figure out, what does a man have to drive a truck? Some of that kind of stuff. And so I kind of remember a decent amount of like, you know, this is what a man knows how to play an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. And getting into teaching and coaching and you know, just raising a family and stuff. You know, I try to do it in track. It probably happens more like in quick little snippets.
Sure.
I've wanted to get like, it's really hard. The team's so big. It's hard to get them all together.
Yeah.
And like, I did it a couple years ago. I've done a couple times where we get all the guys together in a room and try to talk about what we think it means to be a man. We've done it a lot in football. We go up to a mountain camp and we talk about what's authentic masculinity, what's fake masculinity. And I think probably the thing that's most presented to like, let's say a teenage boy on the football team is probably the like physically fit, affluent, and like sowing your wild oats or whatever, right? Having Riz is what the kids all say now. So, yeah, that wasn't the term we used back when I was in high school.
No,
but that's what they say now. but then like we know on the other end, like the phrase toxic masculinity,
Yep.
we know masculinity is attacked.
Yep.
Right. And men need to be more female.
Right. Right.
The term didn't exist. You know, I don't ever, who knows? Nothing's new. Nothing's new under the sun,
Yeah,
right? Solomon,
yeah.
nothing's new under the sun. But in college, I had an art class, an art professor, and he said I needed to get more in touch with my feminine side
Right.
in my art.
Right.
And I actually told him in front of a class that that if that's what he thought, then he didn't really understand what a true gentleman is, which was kind of a bold thing to say.
Dang.
And he actually handled it well, kind of a tit for tat there. And then he said, you still got to get in touch with your feminine side and draw something. So I drew a dead flower, like that had been like stepped on or something like that.
You drew something pretty as masculine as you could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. It's really interesting to think about what Jesus would actually say about this. Even in like the Christian culture,
Yep.
like what is masculine? I don't really like camouflage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have any visible tattoos.
Yep.
Yours are really cool. I'd love to hear. I like hearing people's stories about them.
Yeah.
I don't drive a pickup truck.
Yep.
I actually like my steak well done, which is nobody does. I get that look.
I don't. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I like it burnt.
Okay. My parents were the same way, so I hated steak. I didn't understand why people liked steak
until you probably had it.
Yep, I had it
medium rare, and you're like, oh, I get it. Yeah,
but that's okay. That's all right.
So, yeah. So you know, I don't know as though the church has it figured out either.
Yeah.
But there has been probably starting way before then. You know, I think that there's a lot of people really interested in this topic, and there's a lot of people starting to write about it, to think about it, to try to formulate some like easy to remember things. I mean, think about like John Eldridge and Wild at Heart and Raising a Modern Day Knight. And one of my favorite books that I read recently is Brant Hansen's The Men We Need.
Okay.
Really resonated with that book and went through it with my son. One of his favorite points in there, which has really given me a sort of a simple guide, is if we want to get into, you know, we're kind of talking about how manhood is like misunderstood, being attacked and things like that. But if we want to start to get into some sort of definition, he talks about Adam in the garden is called to tend his garden. And he does a very poor job. Like right from the beginning. In fact, even as you guys, I think was it Dave you were talking about it with, or somebody, as you were talking about like, hey, when did men start becoming like passive? Like he goes right back to the first words out of Adam's mouth about Eve are, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. You've done a really good thing. The next thing out of his mouth is she did it.
Yeah.
Like,
abdication.
Yes. And so like if his job is to tend the garden, then first of all, that gives you work.
Absolutely.
It gives you purpose. It's not a job you can do that's clean, right? And guys, like if you actually tend a garden, which I think I would, I'm sure if I had the real opportunity to do it, I'd probably enjoy it. I think there's a lot of stress in like putting those things in there and watering and hoping, but they're just like cool when they start.
That's because it's Colorado, man.
Right.
Like the sun kills everything here. There's no water.
It's true. I did grow up in a place where grass just grows and like there's water from the sky and there's no hail in it and big trees.
Yeah, you can plant stuff and expect it to actually grow. You don't have to like pray 7 times a day that, you know, it may grow.
But if my calling is to tend my garden,
Yeah.
then there's more than like I said, it gives you purpose, it gives you calling, and then you think about who's in my garden,
Yeah.
right? The people around me are in my garden, right? If the garden's sort of an analogy, right? My children are growing in my garden. So is my most important job as a dad in my home, as a father, is to help people grow, right? To
Man.
help my family
Yeah.
grow. And then to think, one of my favorite quotes of his is, your wife is the most important flower in your garden, right?
Mm.
Then my calling is that, and that's such a calling of servanthood.
Absolutely.
It's a calling of like, I'm not the center of attention
Yep.
in that. He made this other cool quote that made me think of, he was talking about this guy who was like the patriarch of this family, and he wasn't super loud and he wasn't outspoken, but he was just kind of like, he was like the tree that the family just flourished under. And it made me think of like Doc Holliday, like, Wyatt, you're an oak, right? That's a cool analogy. Like, you're immovable,
Yep.
right? You're a tree being fled by flowing water,
Yep.
and people are flourishing. So that's getting a little bit into what I actually think a man should be.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to explore more how the culture attacks it.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. I mean, do you think that you mentioned earlier that culture doesn't have a direction, or that's kind of your observation, that culture just has this spinning compass?
Yeah.
And so what are you seeing? Because, I have a 15-year-old, and then I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And what are you seeing that, because, we see it. I work in the mental health field.
Yep.
Which, for better or for worse, has some thoughts about, some of the ways that men act. And, I think that, so I see it from that lens, and then I see it through a lot of media. What do you see with, like, you talk about you take those guys up to the mountains,
Right.
what do you guys talk about? Like, what do you tell them? Or what are you, sorry, what are you seeing culture tell them that's different than what you think actual masculinity should be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said, they get a lot of messages, right? They get the message that being a man is either bad or it's in no way different than being a female, right? That there's just no difference. There happens to be two genders, but you can switch if you want to.
Yep.
And so there's no difference. But if there's no difference, but if there is a difference, and if one of them has to be worse than the other, clearly it's men that have to be like that are worse, right? And you hear the like attacking the patriarchy and stuff like that. So I think they get that message that I can't be too proud to be a guy. And so, like, getting into what is pride and what should you be proud of and stuff, that goes to identity, right? It goes to, am I okay with who I am? But then they very much get the message of, I have to be good at stuff, right? They're trying to figure out what they're good at. If I'm not physical, if I'm not physically attractive, if I don't have a square jaw,
Sure.
right? If I don't have those kind of things, then I'm probably less of a man. If I can't make money, I'm probably less of a man. And then there's just, and the culture is so interesting because it doesn't have a, like I said, it spins, right? It doesn't have a clear voice. It just has all of these sort of subtle messages and attacks. Most of the conversing that they see, like they all love sports, right? I mean, not all of them, but they mostly love sports. And unless you're watching the game itself, most of the conversation in sports is like, I attack you, you attack me. Like it's all this like back and forth and punking each other.
Yeah.
And right. So a man's gotta be really good at punking somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. Gotta be able to do the mic drop or whatever. You know, there's a lot of, they're boys, right?
Yep.
And the things that boys have struggled with since the beginning of time, right? Probably Cain and Abel were the first ones to be like jokesters and think stuff. They probably like, you know, messed with their dad and laughed about it and stuff like that. So there's like, you know, the humor side of things. You know, I've been trying to tell kids, you know, for years that it's possible to have humor that's not at the expense of others.
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
Yep.
Now there's friends that tease each other, right?
Absolutely.
That's normal.
Yep.
But a lot of the humor comes at the like ripping on each other and stuff like that. It is interesting. It was like in the 80s, 90s, it was cool to like not think school is cool, like to be sort of this rebel sort of thing. Like I don't see that as much anymore. But the guys don't feel, we could get in all kinds of topics, but the pressure that girls feel and put on each other to be academically successful is a really interesting thing. But like the pressure to be high performing, the pressure to go to college, the pressure to do the things that their dads are probably doing, you know, driving the big trucks, having the houses. And then, you know, a lot of people in your generation are struggling with some of the owning a home and some of that kind of stuff. So I just think it's like massively mixed messages from all directions. Yeah. And it also depends obviously on where you're looking and what you're watching.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that. Interestingly, like I've thought about this quite a bit in terms of like the things we worried about as like teachers and adults with our kids and how that has changed. Like when I was in high school, it was don't drink and drive, don't do drugs. And there were signs everywhere. Yeah. Right. It was like, and there were acronyms for everything. Everybody was against drunk driving. It was mad. It was sad. It was like, there were in the training room, there were posters of like, you know, people with like face cancer and stuff like that. But like when prom comes around, we don't really worry about our kids drunk driving anymore. It seems like it's the adults, like the reckless guys that are doing it at 2 a.m. and stuff. We don't have that same fear. I was in the middle of a track practice in college when I heard somebody say Littleton and Columbine, and I had never heard either of those places, right? And so we spent so much time in fear of kids hurting each other, and then, as we know, our community several years ago went through now we're afraid of kids hurting themselves, and so just thinking about, I'm not even sure where exactly I was going with some of that, but just
it's changed.
It's changed. And so I don't even always know if I have a great feel for what a kid's really feeling and what they're really struggling with. And because there's so much out there.
There is. Well, and you know, you look at these generations now are, you know, what's considered digital natives, right? They've grown up in a time where they have not grown up in a time where there wasn't the internet.
Right.
where there wasn't cell phones, where there wasn't,
Right.
you know, all this connectivity. It's gonna be Mike and I's 20th high school reunion next year, and we're talking with one of the other guys, and we were talking about, hey, we're gonna get all the Xboxes, and we're gonna do a LAN party where, you know, we run the cable and we connect all the Xboxes together. You know, this is before you go on the internet to play with people. This was you could take all these Xboxes and chain them together, and then you could all play. You know, I think it was like 16. I think it was the max.
What were you guys gonna play?
Halo. Well, we're gonna play Halo.
Oh, okay.
You know, that's probably one of the that was the big first person shooter that we grew up playing. So, well, not grew up, but like that was in high school. But it's funny, like this generation is so plugged in, like they have non-stop information.
Right.
One of the things we found, the mental health side, is things like sleep deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kids, the dopamine that they get when they get those likes, and that sorry, that creates this addictive nature, right, to the phones, to Facebook, to all the social medias. And so these kids, not only are they trying to figure out life, but then all of a sudden they have, you know, media influencers from all over the world telling them things that may or may not be good things for them to do. They're seeing these trends on TikTok and Instagram, and our kids are just overloaded with messages. And part of me can't blame them for like not knowing where to go. Because the other thing that you've seen, and I don't know how it was with you, but like I grew up in a home where my dad worked and my mom stayed at home.
Yep.
And so like we had this balance, right? Where I couldn't get away with anything because, you know, mom saw it, it's funny we brought up homeschooling earlier. I was homeschooled until 7th grade. And so, yeah, my mom was very engaged in my education, right? Now you have a lot of families, and my family now is one of them, where you have to have dual income in order to pay for the home, to pay for all the bills, to pay for everything. And so now when it comes to education and really imparting ideals and imparting values, like it feels like there's less time because we're running around trying to just survive. You work all day, and then you got homework and dinner and bedtime. And so part of me, I mean, your observation makes a ton of sense, right? Where are they going to go?
Right.
We put our kids in front of TVs. We put our kids in front of screens, and then we go, well, I want you to only believe these things.
Right.
And I haven't spent time with you. You've spent time with the TV. You've spent time with Instagram. You've spent time with TikTok. And it reminds me, like, it goes back to that metaphor of tending the garden. Like, we have, in this metaphor, we have walked away from the garden. We're over here we're sort of watering the garden, or, you know, maybe we're sort of weeding the garden, but the garden's a mess, right? There's all kinds of weeds growing through the garden. There's parts of the garden that are dying, and we don't even pay attention to it because we're so focused on what's outside of the garden.
And the weeds are literally weeds are the worst.
The worst.
And they are Christy and I always talk about this, where like they're such a view of sin.
Oh yeah.
Like they grow up so fast and they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Underneath, there was some kind of weed when we redid our yard a couple years ago. Like it was all like every time I thought I had it.
Yeah.
I was having the thought while we were talking about kids trying to navigate stuff. They're trying to navigate a really complicated mixed message world, and they're doing it as addicts.
Yeah.
And the addiction, dopamine, that's a really interesting, that whole path is a really interesting conversation about, like, addiction is the narrowing of things that bring you joy.
Yep.
and the highs and lows and the slippery slopes. And I was talking about it with my dad a little bit recently. They're really involved in Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian version of sort of AA.
I know.
with all kinds of addictive things. And he talks about like, you have to, if you're going to scoop whatever the addictive thing is out of your life, you're going to have to fill it with something. And the kind of things they're addicted to. And if you think about like, who are their role models too? Like if it's not like fathers, brothers, people in the church, and is it movie characters? Is it superheroes?
Right.
Which is really cool. Almost all superheroes, right? They follow the storyline, the model of some sort of like sacrificial service, which is really cool. But they are also all jacked. And Mark Swantek and I have had this conversation. We've even brought it up a little bit with some of our classes. Women went through the body image thing a long time ago. They probably went through it with Barbie. I mean, there might be the timeline could be somewhere different in there, but like a totally non-realistic figure, right? And am I still beautiful? And will someone still love me? And do I have to look like that and stuff like that? They went through it a long time ago, and they're still struggling with it. Right? A lot of females are doing things to their body that show that they are clearly looking for some attention. Guys are going through it in a different way now. Actually, I teach this a little bit in strength and conditioning. In the post World War II, in the 40s, 50s, the athletic heroes were Edmund Hillary ran the 4-minute mile. Roger Bannister ran the first sub 4-minute mile or whatever. Edmund Hillary hiked Mount Everest. And there were like distance running was cool. Country club sports were cool, like tennis and stuff like that. There were football teams, and one of the things I love about football is we need all shapes and sizes in that sport. And then in the early 70s, sorry, my dates might be off. 2 movies came out: Arnold Schwarzenegger, Pumping Iron, and Conan the Barbarian. And like there was this explosion in, hey, I might even be built more like that guy, maybe a little bit, or I want to look like that guy. And it didn't happen overnight. Like, you see the pictures of like original Batman. He like was dad bod, and now it's like Lego Batman has a 9-pack or whatever. But all the like dudes and some of the stuff guys are doing to like try to have that body because they think they need that identity because that's what's presented to them. And maybe it's because they go to the gym and they see the big dudes. And
I'll tell you, man, like I was thinking about kind of along those lines this morning. So I try to go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and the guys, I go to a smaller gym, so this probably speaks to it too, but the guys who I would say are the Instagram ready, influencers, that level, I've seen maybe 2 guys come through my gym. And one dude is legit like 6'4" and 260. Dude was he was shoulder pressing 110-pound dumbbells. I was like, I can't even fathom that.
I could shrug I could probably shrug
maybe one. And so there's not a lot of guys. So I think I was talking with somebody not too long ago about this. Like, there's a lot of body dysmorphia for guys now, and a lot of it is because when you look on these social media platforms, the things, the algorithms there to feed you the things that you didn't know you wanted. Right. I looked at these influencers, these guys who are, that all they do all day is lift, right? Their whole life is built around that. They get to the supplements they take, the nutrition that they take. It's literally unrealistic because,
Dude, are you natty, bro?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. There's a guy on Instagram, and he kind of pokes fun at a lot of it. He's a former pro skater, and he's kind of turned into a bodybuilder. But he's like, if you're natty, you're not trying, or something like that. Just kind of making fun of like this. Yeah, people. There's a lot of dudes who I've talked to who are taking steroids, because they want that. Like, they want that perfect body. They want to be able to, and in a lot of ways, I mean, it is a depiction of strength, right?
And one of the hidden addictions is affirmation.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big one. And if you're addicted to it, you are probably miserable.
Yep.
Because you're at the mercy of other people and the whims of what they happen to say.
Yep.
This is a conversation I've had with one of my female track coaches for years, of like, and it goes back to, I say I don't allow, I love my wife. I try to encourage her not to, when she's talking about other moms, to say that they're put together.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a term that moms use when they don't feel great about themselves. When my wife could not be cuter when she's in a messy bun and she wears these like hiking boots and she doesn't even tie the laces, and like she's just wearing a hoodie, and I think she's just adorable, and she's like, she feels bad about herself because she's not put together. Girls only get compliments when they're dressed up. And they get them from other females.
Yep.
And so there's this pressure to be put together all the time, because if they're walking around when they're most comfortable, which is probably sweatpants or whatever. And actually, fashion's a whole interesting thing, but the fashion right now for girls, it's like the biggest, baggiest stuff possible.
Yep.
Which is, as a dad, I love it.
Yeah.
I think my daughter's beautiful no matter what she wears.
Yeah.
But yeah, you watch guys hang out with each other, and, a dude who's skinnier probably isn't getting any, but if you're chasing that, I bet, how many hours are you putting in the gym for not that many compliments?
Oh, yeah.
And what are you taking yourself away from? So getting back to our original, like, who are the idols that boys have? Like, who are they looking at? Like, we kind of talked about the athletes and the whole punk each other kind of stuff. And I'll punk you, you punk me, kind of acting like, children kind of thing. So there's that. There's like the unrealistic looking movie characters.
Yep.
And then there's like, look at what music do they listen to? And what do those dudes look and act like?
I mean, I guess that's a good question. I don't know what it is now. I know what it was when I was growing up. It was rappers who were usually jacked.
Or if they were skinny, they still had a lot of riz.
Yep.
Because they had cars and money and
Yep.
Or whatever.
Or for me, it was like the punk scene. So it was like the rebels.
Yep.
Right.
Do you know who? Do you know who Andrew Huberman is?
Yeah.
Do you know why he wears a button-down black shirt?
I do not.
All the time. His favorite ska band artist always wore a button-down black shirt, and he went to a concert one time, and the guy was just like sweating and getting after it.
Yeah.
And he just thought it was so. He comes out of skater culture.
I love that.
That dude is rocked up though.
Yeah.
There's one video of him like doing some sort of heavy carry. He lifts hard.
Yeah.
He's also, I mean, to be like that, you either have to have like a pretty big genetic disposition to it, or you gotta be unnatural or work in probably an unhealthy way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in to do that natty would take, I mean, the amount of calories, the amount of dedication and time out of your day you have to spend. I mean, you have to spend 5-6 hours doing stuff like that. And then, oh, by the way,
have that energy for that.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, like one of the things that a lot of those guys do, they sleep a lot. Like when movie stars are getting ready for those big roles and they're putting on muscle, they're spending a good chunk of that sleeping, right? So you can recover, build faster. Yeah, dude, it's kind of a problem because even for me, I find myself looking at that going, crap, I need to spend more time. I need to eat cleaner. And look, there are some truths in there, right? Like I probably can clean up my diet a little bit, right? But is it going to am I after it because, oh, I want to live longer, or am I after it because like I want to look like that?
Right.
And that's the wrong for me. And I think for most guys, like there's nothing wrong with having those goals. But if the only thing you're after is to achieve that, like what happens when you do achieve that? Like let's say you do achieve that.
The accomplishment, the dopamine hit from the accomplishment of something big oftentimes brings this massive crash. Guys who win the Super Bowl and they're like in their hotel room the next night and they're like,
what now?
What's next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I could chase my bottom 2 abs, right?
Yeah.
And eat in a way that would be a little tougher for my family and probably be on some level unthankful.
Yep.
I didn't know if it'd be a topic of conversation, so I wore one of the shirt I'm wearing today says leftovers on it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I partly made it because in track, the group that I coach, I call them my leftovers. Like the distance, the throwers, the hurdlers, the jump, they all go that way. And anybody who's like not one of those things, those are my leftovers. But it's also because I love leftovers. So Christy and I made a commitment, a sacrificial commitment, very like early before kids and all that kind of stuff, that she was going to stay home. And the Lord has provided in unbelievable ways. He continues to keep us in a place where he has to provide for us. There's actually I don't know the reference. There's actually there's a proverb that says, help me to neither be rich or poor, but be somewhere in the middle. So I'm reliant on you or whatever. Actually her mom, who's an amazing woman, has this really cool story of like, she was dating a guy and, in my mind, the story probably doesn't go quite the way it is, but basically like they're out on a date and he was a possibility and stuff. And he's talking about like how he wouldn't ever eat leftovers. He just doesn't like the way they taste and, just rather, and we know some people like that. And in my mind, she like says, in my mind, she like dumps him and gets up and leaves immediately.
Yeah.
But I don't think it happened quite in that pace, but it happened on some level. Like this man's really unthankful. And she grew up in some like, some really good times and some really bad times. Actually the verse that I think is probably, I don't want to get into like misquoting verses and things like that, but the verse of I can do all things through him who strengthens me. The preceding verses, Paul says, I know what it is to have a lot and I know what it is to be, to not have a lot. And the one thing I've learned in all of this is I can do anything through Christ. It's about contentment.
It is. And Paul says that, right?
Yes. He directly says that. It's not about like, he'll move all my mountains or whatever. We could get into all kinds of theology kind of stuff if we want to, but it's about contentment. So an idea I wanted to get across on masculinity. I was listening to Jocko a little bit today. I like Jocko. And the guy was asking him like, what do you think are like, what's the problem with masculinity? What are the masculine traits?
Right.
And stuff like that. And one of his answers that I like, it's, was let's take any perceived masculine trait physical strength,
Yeah.
aggressiveness,
Yep.
something like that. Take any trait, generosity, even something like that, protector, and let's take it to the extreme. It's no longer healthy.
Yep.
Even protector,
Yep.
right? I could protect my kids in a way where they aren't allowed to explore, to flourish,
Yeah.
to experience.
Yep.
Or I could not protect them
Yep.
in a way that is like they're on their own.
Yeah.
Right. Aggressiveness. Like one of the things I've heard it multiple times recently. And it would be really interesting. I know I've had this thought before. Everybody's probably had this thought. Like in heaven, are we going to get to see some of the famous events and what it was actually like?
Yeah.
Right. When Jesus goes into the temple and clears the temple,
Yeah.
he goes back and creates a whip.
Yep.
And goes in and clears the temple.
Yep.
Like pretty aggressive. Like
Yep.
what was that actually like? I've actually wondered if they're going to try to depict that in The Chosen or not.
Shoot.
I
Yeah.
don't know if they will.
I hope so. That'd be interesting.
That's pretty aggressive, right? He can clearly handle that sort of aggressiveness, right? We don't want men, right? Some of the toxic masculinity is because of some of the fear of what an overly aggressive man would be like, right?
Yeah.
But we certainly don't want passive to the point of inaction.
No.
So I think as we start to explore a little bit of what we do actually want, what some of the balance is, like we want some balance. In some of that kind of stuff.
I think, and I don't know if you've heard it, but we've kind of created like a kind of a mini definition or a touchstone. I know, Mike, I know. But it's, masculinity is the pursuit of strength under control, wielded with purpose in service to God in defense of the good, the beauty, and the true. And even in just a few months we've been doing this, that has changed a little bit.
Right.
Because the whole idea is this is kind of our starting point. As we talk to more people and as we gather more information, we're going to come back and revisit that. But what you're talking about is strength is one of the things that I think we immediately just go, that's masculine. Like just physical strength, even like at times like mental strength. You mentioned stoicism earlier, and there's a huge uptick and like a lot of people are interested in that now, for a lot of reasons. But like that control component is so important to being a man,
right?
Because you can be, you have, and we see it, right? You see it on UFC. Some of these dudes are like absolute animals, machines. Like their skill level, they are masters at what they do inside the ring. But then they come across a fan or somebody upsets them and they lose it. Right? And so it's like, dude, inside that ring, like that's a masculine thing. When you're outside that ring and you're acting that way, that's not masculine. That's not being a man. You're not under control, because the control part is what's hard. The strength part, the acting out part, the aggression part, that's not the hard part. It's actually controlling yourself and using it appropriately, because that's the other thing that's hard too, because there are times when I want to punch somebody, right? There are lots of times when I want to punch somebody. Right. However, like there might be a time I need to punch somebody, right?
Right.
And knowing when to do that, when it's appropriate, and being capable of doing that is really important.
And having the physical courage to actually do it when it is truly needed.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's all good.
Lost my train of
you were
thought.
talking about Jocko.
Oh yeah, Jocko. So he was talking about balance. Going back to the book I love that I'd read recently, Brant Hansen's The Men We Need. One of the things he talks about is, which I think is an awesome view of strength under control, is he talks about especially the innocent, the weaker, the however we want to define those, are people safer because you're in the room, or are they less safe?
Mm.
And I think it's an awesome view.
That's good.
Because It's they could be physically unsafe
Yeah.
because you're there, like, but most boys, like the previous job I had before I came to TCA, I probably broke up 6 or 8 fights that year, for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
I've heard of them. I've never even seen one at TCA.
Yeah.
Right. So there's not a lot of boys walking around creating physical danger.
Yeah.
But are kids walking around creating mental, emotional danger?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So is your humor at the expense of others? We had talked about that. Right. So are they safer both physically and emotionally?
Mm.
One of the stories I've told when I've talked about this, I've talked about it a little bit with the football guys in the track, said those kind of things.
Yeah.
The shooting in Aurora, right? Most of the injuries in the shooting in Aurora were husbands and boyfriends being shot in the back because they were protecting.
Yeah.
I was at church one time and there was a guy that started in the back and he started moving his way up and he ended up being a heckler.
Okay.
And he stood up a couple rows from our pastor and made some comment about something. It was hard to hear what he had said. I think I don't remember, but you could see, because I kind of was off to the side and I saw him and I'm like, do I need to do something about this?
Yeah.
And you started to see some of the men, when they realized something wasn't right, some of the men started to bow their back.
Mm.
And you could see that some started to cower a little bit, right?
Interesting.
But just and do you have the strength under control? Do you have the physical courage to stand up, right? If there is danger, if there is another bully in the room, right? Do you have the physical courage to? And I actually think I've thought about this a little bit too, just as I think about bullies and stuff like that, right? We always heard that like bullies are bullies because they've been bullied.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is probably true. Some of it is just they've had some really bad examples set for them, right? I bet their dad's a bully to their mom.
Absolutely.
Some of that kind of stuff.
Or to them.
Or just the culture. Another idea, really cool thing I want to get to here in a second. The culture of the home, right? Is it a culture where people are ripped on and made fun of? Right? That's the example they've set. One of the things Brant talks about is, and I want to talk about a really cool view of leadership that an image that I've used for a long time that I think is awesome. He said, one of your goals, like in your garden, your home, right, is to flourish. One of your roles as a father and a husband is to set the melody of your home. And then he goes, I kind of like that. And then he starts talking about like, now maybe the foundation of your home. I'm like, no, I actually kind of like the term melody. And then I think about my own home and what is the melody of my home? Now, I'm not very musical. Like, I don't think I can hold a tune in church. I don't sing very loud because I really like to listen to Christy sing. And I always tell, she doesn't sing very, I tell her when she sings, she's singing straight to my soul and
That's
she gets
awesome.
embarrassed and doesn't like to sing and stuff, but she's really good. Like what would and then I was thinking, like, as I was lifting today, I got a couple things going on in my head right now, but as I was lifting today, I was thinking, what is the melody of my home? I grew up in a home with a dad who struggled with anger a little bit, and we were a little bit on eggshells. Like there wasn't peace all the time. And there's some things that have carried over a little bit from that. I know psychologically we could all talk about how we're all both a reflection of and a response to our parents, probably on some level. I really do not enjoy the sound of slamming doors. Because to me that meant there was anger. But our living room is a football field, laughter, running around, peace. Kids, when they come over, like one of our ministries when we have kids over is they talk about the peace in our home. Like that's the melody of my home. And then I was also thinking, all right, what would the actual music be like? I mean, we listen to music all the time. The kids bought me a record player a couple of years ago.
That's kind of awesome.
And so I have 3 albums. They're all Need to Breathe or Wilder Woods. I don't know if you know Need to Breathe or not. I'm a big fan. They're nodding in the back row over there. I'll do you a favor. Go listen to some Need to Breathe.
Okay.
Or Bear Reinhardt in Wilder Woods.
Okay.
I'm gonna buy a camper and follow him around someday. I got to go to Red Rocks and watch them on my 40th birthday.
That's cool.
That was amazing. So anyway, this view of leadership that my dad told me one time, I've used it for years when I talk leadership, is we all think of leadership, right, as the classic pyramid like this, right? You're at the top and you tell people what to do. But what if leadership is an upside down triangle? And what if the leader's at the bottom, right? And his number one goal is to lift up and encourage first the people right above him who would be subordinates.
Yep.
My coach, like if I'm this leader in my track team, right? It's my coaches, it's my captains. If they're encouraged, if they're lifted up, they then do the same.
Yep.
And I was actually talking to another track coach recently. He was struggling with like a really pompous athlete and bad family, something like that. And I was kind of giving him that image, and I'm like, your job is to keep that thing balanced, right? Your job is to set the compass. Your job is to set the melody. I'm going to use that, right? What's that music like, right? Is it peaceful? Is it exciting? Is it dark? Is it intense? Is it discordant? So just as you think about, our calling, not all men are called to be fathers.
It's true.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But probably most are. And most have that in their heart and desire. And as you think about, what's my role in the home, right? It's to lay the foundation, right? It's to set the melody. It's to help everyone else grow, right? Because it's sacrificial, right? And it's not about, it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about my ego. It's about making, I love my wife so much that I want what's best for her.
Yeah.
And I want her to flourish.
And I'll do anything it takes to make that happen.
Yes.
The gardening metaphor resonates with me. In probably the last 4 or 5 years, have kind of gotten into gardening a little bit. And so we do usually do an annual vegetable garden. I built some raised beds in our backyard. And so we do some vegetables. And then this last year, I've been wanting to do this since we bought our house. My great grandparents were from Italy, and when they were in California, they grew grapes and did wine. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, I don't remember when I heard that. I have no idea, but that's always I'm like, that's so cool. I want to do that because there's so much that's involved in it. And so this last year, I bought some grapes, and I wanted to do it the previous year, but in order to get wine grapes, I actually had to order them 6 months in advance.
Oh.
So it was I was ordering. So to get the grapes that I got in April, I ordered them in October because it's Colorado and we're cold. You can't.
Can you grow?
You can
grapes.
Yeah. So there's actually a few. There's actually a few varieties of grapes that grow well. Cabernet Sauvignon are the ones, the Cabernet varieties are the ones that grow. And so I got them this year. The amount of time you said that, and I was thinking the amount of time I spent on if the level of detail that I put into, because you have to be careful of the soil quality. You have to have it fertilized properly. It has to have this support system. I built these trellises with these wires so it can grow up. And I'm literally out there every day looking at it, tying it, because you have to the main trunk, and it's a 3-year process. So to get grapes that you can turn into wine, the first 2 years are basically setting the structure for the grapes. So this year every day I was going out, I was looking at the new growth. You have to trim off certain parts of it. So you only only one shoot grows up.
Our analogy, right? Discipline in your
Discipline,
home,
attention to detail, like the level
fertile
of
soil.
absolutely everything. And it was time out of my day. It was, but I'll tell you, like the joy in watching it grow. Like as you were talking, you mentioned the garden. I'm like, shoot, if I approached my family with that level of care and detail, how amazing can my family be? Because all of a sudden, what I am looking at is I'm not looking at the here and now, because the here and now, sometimes that sucks, right? Sometimes that is not fun. I'm looking at, okay, I want this long term. I want the grapes at the end. I want this amazing family, this amazing, and this goes for people who don't have families, right? Like it could be your sphere of influence. It can be the people that you coach or the people that you lead at your work, or, the junior people that work in your building, right? These same kinds of principles apply. And when you study businesses that are really successful, you find a lot of leaders that are like that. So there's a book, Simon Sinek. I'm a fan. He and I disagree on some stuff, but he makes some amazing points. And there's a book that he wrote called Leaders Eat Last.
Yep, which is comes out of some military stuff.
It does, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly where it comes out of. That was his observations, was
seeing to your men before
you even see to your needs. And that goes that reflects that garden metaphor, because your garden's growing. It needs water when it needs water. It can't wait for you.
Right.
It needs you to tend to the soil. It needs you to do all of these things in their right season. And that has nothing to do with your wants, with your desires. If they happen to line up, awesome. But it really is, I'm putting aside everything I'm doing in order to make this happen. And I'm really intentional, because in gardening, you can very easily screw up your garden, right? It's very, very easy.
Well, and it is sacrificial, but the amazing thing about the Lord and how he's created us and how he gifts us is there may be some things that we're asked to sacrifice, but if we really think about the things that we truly enjoy and are passionate about, those are going to be used as part of our calling and as part of our purpose and in our home. Like, if I really think about, like, yes, I can play a lot of college football 25 on my PlayStation 5 with my son, right? Like I could really get into that. Yes, I could get into some stuff, but if I truly am passionate about, if I love righteousness, right, and I'm seeking the right things, the Lord has given me all sorts of hobbies and interests, and he's going to use those in my calling, and he's gonna allow me those if they're things that are righteous. Another thought I had is, we have a tendency, like, thinking about boys in video games, right? They love them. And on some level, it would be easy to shame them with that. And like, think about, like, why a kid would love to be on a phone, right? There's obviously the addiction part of it, or whatever. They love video games. What are they doing in those video games that they truly is attractive to them, right? They're being creative, right? They're exploring. There's almost always some sort of building involved, right? There's problem solving involved. There's usually, even in sports games, right, there's defeating of a bad guy, right, in some way. One thought I had, I forget what sparked it. We were up at mountain camp, and I was listening to somebody talk, and they were talking about, like, the traits of masculinity, and I started to think about, what are the character traits of the individual parts of the Trinity?
Okay.
What are God's character traits? He is the original creator. Nobody, like, our son, he had a teacher talk about, like, how all art is basically like copying of somebody. It all has to go back. And actually, he made the comment that like, if all art is copying essentially of the original creator,
Yeah.
then when I'm only praised when I make art that's dark and graphic, he's like, art is creativity is a calling by God. It's a gift. And when that's my art, it's a rebellion against the gift of God.
Mm.
So God is creative, right? He made us in his image,
Yep.
right? He's a father. He is about, he's the true judge. Now he offers obviously some of the judging to his son. He created mercy.
Mm-hmm.
He created rules and righteousness, and he created mercy. The first thing he does when he judges and punishes Adam and Eve, he removes them from the garden, and then he makes them clothes.
Mm-hmm.
He gives them their curses, right? They deserve. There's punishment.
Yep.
There's trimming, and then he gives them their clothes. And then there's that awesome verse where he talks about like the woman's offspring is going, and like Satan's going to strike at his heel.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's already talking about the redemption plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he's about redemption. What are the character traits of Christ? He's sacrificial,
Mm-hmm.
discipleship,
Mm-hmm.
humility.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac and I were talking about this the other day. There's no other created being in all creation that doesn't need to be humble other than the Lord.
Mm.
Even Christ, his son, humbled himself.
Yep.
Even the Spirit, right, works for the Father. And so he's sacrificial love, right? He teaches us love. And then the Spirit, right? The Spirit is the encourager.
Yep.
The Spirit is the guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the character traits that that we have deep within us, that the Lord has placed in us, it's all his traits
Yeah.
that are in his image.
I hadn't thought about it. I mean, yes, I thought about like those are his traits, but I love how you broke it down into the three, because I think as
I have more,
we
but my list wasn't in front of me. I was trying to remember some of my list. You can add to it.
Well, next time we have you on, man, we'll just have you bring your notes. But no, I love that you kind of did that, because as we've been talking about, like, okay, what is masculinity? It's a huge idea,
Mhm.
right? It's a massive idea. It has a lot of weight.
It's also a simple idea,
Right. Well,
created by our Father
right.
as part of his aligning of things.
Well, and so I love that you kind of tied it into the Trinity, because those are where you see distinct attributes come out.
Yep.
Right? You're like, oh, I can see that there. Because the Bible starts out, but let us make man in our own image. Okay, cool. And then there's Adam, right? It's when you start to look at and align those, like, oh, this is where that aligns. This is where that aligns. I like that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming on some level it's a physical image too. I mean, he
Sure.
references his hands and
Mm-hmm.
his feet and his
Mhm.
face and
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just lost my thought again.
That's all right. Well, I mean, we are like 2 hours in.
Probably time to call.
I was just gonna say, man, maybe we could get like maybe final thoughts. So like, what are some things that you want to communicate? Like, if as people watch this, like, what do you want them to take away?
Yeah, good question. Good final summary. The Lord created us male and female. We didn't even get to. I wanted to talk about we'll have to do this again.
We'll do
sometime.
this again. Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to get to one of my favorite verses, Micah 6:8. And it just begins with he, and just how much can we talk about just that, right? He created male and female. He created males for a purpose.
Mhm.
It's for his glory, but we also have, right, people that live with no purpose or really shallow purpose. They tend to be very sad, right? They tend to struggle with all sorts of meaninglessness and stuff. Almost all purpose, in fact, all any job you have, right? If it really at its base is about serving others, right? Any occupation you have, right, is probably on some level it's about serving others. And so as we start to think about, first of all, we want to uplift the idea of manhood, but we don't want to praise it in an unhealthy way,
Right.
right? We don't want to be like we're men and beat our chests and be jerks about it,
Yep.
right? We want balance. We want to be the men that are needed. And man, does our culture need responsible, like we didn't even get into all of the taking responsibility for your own actions, standing up for what's right, not standing up for what you believe in, standing up for what's right.
Yeah, because this can be different.
Yeah, because the culture praises, it's sort of a weird thing to be praised too. Like the culture praises standing up for what you believe in. But the problem is we believe a lot of lies.
Yeah.
Standing up for what's right, loving righteousness, being the tenders of our garden, which the gardens that we're called to. I was going to say earlier, like if you're not yet a husband or a father and you desire to be those things, right? The Lord, he does talk about answering the desires of our hearts, right? He wants to change our heart first.
Yep.
But he, one of our favorite guys that Christy and I listened to, and before we were getting married, a pastor from Texas a long time ago, he talked about if you're desiring to be married, he has a Southern draw. Run as fast as you can for the Lord. Run as fast as you can, and then just look to your left and look to your right and see who's running at the same speed, and say, "Hiya." So we've joked with Isaac and Joel as we talk about. We use the term G-walk and G-mock. Someday Isaac's going to meet a godly woman of character, and he's going to make her his own. And Joel is too, and Maddie's going to meet a godly man of character, and he's going to look at her and he's going to say, "Hiya." I've rambled enough.
No, I love it, man. I thank you so much for coming on and just your thoughts and being vulnerable, because I think this just being on something like this takes some guts, man. You're putting yourself out there. So thank you for being here. Thank you for,
Cool to do it.
Yeah, man. We're going to have you on again, and you're going to have to bring your awesome mug.
Okay.
I will work on getting a better mug. This was like really cheap off of Amazon, and my wife cricketed the grow a beard and then we'll talk. So I like it.
The message is great.
I think so.
Maybe the handle could be a little bit.
It definitely could. Well, yeah. And you talk about the thin walls. I don't know if I got the right walls. So I'll work on that. No, dude, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on. And yeah, dude, we'll have you back on and we'll have some more fun.
Let's do it.
All right, man.
Part two.
Love it.
Coming up.
I love it.
To be continued.
Yeah, to be continued. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you guys next time, and hope you guys journey well.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned to numb the ache inside.